My name's Don Bullis, and I've been asked to spend a few minutes talking to you about Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid is, of course, one of New Mexico's most famous citizens. I've often said that if we had a favorite outlaw, like we have a favorite cookie, it'd be Billy the Kid. The important thing about Billy is that he's just gained this place in history, in the history of the American West and the Lincoln County War, which he really doesn't deserve. And my topic is, who was Billy the Kid really? So first let's talk about who Billy is in fiction and in legend and so forth. Everybody that ever played trivia knows that Billy the Kid's real name was William Henry Bonney, that he was a major figure in New Mexico's Lincoln County War, that he was born in New York City, that he killed his first man at the age of 12 and killed 21 men in his 21 years of life before he was himself killed. Now here's the interesting thing about that. Not one bit of that is true. First of all, Billy the Kid called himself William Henry Bonney very late in his life. He was probably born William Henry McCarty. His mother's name was Kathleen McCarty. She later on married a man by the name of Henry Antrim, and so William Henry McCarty became William Henry Antrim. And as he went through life and became a criminal, he changed his name to Bonney, and nobody knows where the name Bonney came from. It's my suspicion that that was his mother's maiden name, but I don't know that that's true. Nobody has ever been able to prove that. He went by at one time Kid Antrim. The Hispanic folks called him El Chivito, which means kid goat, Billy Goat, or Billito, which means little Billy. So he went by a whole lot of names, but the notion that he was the kid became most popular. But anybody who was 16, 17 years old, worked around ranches and cattle and so forth, was called the Kid, because he was the youngest guy on the crew. There would have been Tommy the Kids, Jimmy the Kids, Charlie the Kids, anybody who was a kid. So it wasn't unusual for somebody to be called Billy the Kid because he was just a young guy. He may well not have been born in New York City. Well, that's part of the legend. And what's important here is that a guy by the name of Ash Upson ghost wrote a book about Billy the Kid with Pat Garrett, which was called The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. And he stated in there that Billy, all of the things that I've just told you, that's where it all comes from. Killing 21 men in 21 years, being born in New York, and so forth. A local historian here actually went to New York, spent several months there searching around in official documents, trying to discover when he was born and where and so forth. He was never able to find any evidence that William H. Bonney, William Henry Antrim, William Henry McCarty was born there. No evidence that Kathleen McCarty had a child while they were there. He said at one time that he was born in Texas. That is almost certainly a lie because he's not known to have ever spent any time in Texas. So from that standpoint, we don't know who Billy the Kid really was. We know that he was a figure in the Lincoln County War. Very often he's made a major figure in the Lincoln County War. He actually was not. He was never a leader. He was never in any position to have made any kinds of important decisions regarding the war itself. He was a thief. He rode with a group that called themselves the Regulators. They were actually deputy constables, but he was not the leader of the bunch. And even later on, after there had been several changes in leadership, he still wasn't the leader. He didn't become a leader of anything until late in that period, which he was kind of the leader of a gang of rustlers that stole cattle all over Texas and eastern New Mexico, which they sold to a man in the area down around Tularosa. So the question would be, well, how did he get to be so famous if that's true? Well, if he'd become Henry the Kid, do you think he would have been nearly as famous? Probably not. Billy the Kid had a nice ring to it. As I said, Pat Garrett produced this book about Billy. It had all these stirring adventures and tales in it. And then a guy by the name of Walter Noble Burns came along, and he wrote a book about Billy the Kid, and he based most of it on the Garrett book. So he perpetuated this myth about Billy, he expanded on it, and since he could not have known the things that were involved in the book, it was fiction. Well, the pulp writers then got a hold of it, and they started producing what they called penny dreadfuls and dime pulp novel magazines with these stirring stories about Billy the Kid. That grew and grew, and interestingly enough, one historian has traced the popularity of Billy the Kid through the 1970s, and what he found is that during good economic times, Billy the Kid is not very popular and not much heard of. Hard economic times come along, like the Depression in the 1890s or our Depression in the 1930s, and all of a sudden he's really popular because times are hard. We're looking for a popular hero, looking for a Robin Hood that comes and steals from the rich and gives to the poor. In fact, that's one Billy was called that at one point, the Robin Hood of Lincoln County, and he was not. Billy the Kid stole and kept the proceeds. He didn't give them to anybody. There's a Santa Fe writer by the name of Johnny Boggs that's written a book about the movies made about Billy the Kid, and he estimates that there are about 70 movies have been made about him. No character in American history has had as many movies made about him as Billy the Kid has. There have been literally hundreds of books written about him. Some historians have made a career of writing books about Billy the Kid in the Lincoln County War. And not just in this country. One of the best historians of Billy the Kid is a guy from England named Fred Nolan. And Fred's probably written 15 books about Billy the Kid. One of the other facts about him is that he killed 21 men in 21 years. Where that number came from, nobody knows. Again, that's something that Ash Upson came up with. Has a nice ring to it, 21 men, 21 years. It's easy to remember, so that's something we can go with. As a matter of fact, the known killings that he did, that he single-handedly did, amounts to 3 or 4, maybe as many as 5. It is well known that when he escaped from jail the last time, which was in May of 1881, he killed his 2 jail guards, a guy named J.W. Bell and a guy by the name of Bob Ollinger. And he did flatly murder both of them. It wasn't any gunfight, it wasn't any quick draw duel or anything else. He just flatly murdered them. We know that before he was arrested, he'd killed a guy in a saloon fight in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, a guy by the name of Joe Grant, and he tricked Grant. Grant didn't know who he was talking to, and he was drunk, and he was boasting about that he was going to capture Billy the Kid. Well, he didn't know that he was talking to Billy the Kid. Billy asked him if he could see his gun, and this man, like a fool, handed his gun over to Billy. And Billy examined it, and when he did, he turned the cylinder. Now, people familiar with old single-action 6-shooters know that generally only 5 cartridges were carried in the gun, so that the hammer always rested on an empty chamber. That was so that if you dropped the gun or anything, it wouldn't discharge. Well, that was the case here. Billy knew it. He turned the cylinder by one click, gave Grant back his gun, then told Grant who he was. And Grant pulled his gun to shoot. The hammer fell on an empty chamber, and Billy killed him. The only crime for which he was ever convicted was the murder of Sheriff Brady, William Brady. He was involved in the murder of Brady, of the sheriff, and his deputy, George Hinman, and a couple of other guys. But there were, depends on the source, but there were 8 to 11 guys hiding behind an adobe wall and shooting when they were shot. There's nothing to prove that William Bonney was the one who actually killed Brady. In fact, he claimed that he wasn't even shooting at Brady. He claimed he was shooting at Hinman because he was madder at him than he was at Brady. In any event, Brady was shot 10 or 11 times, and Hinman was shot an equal number of times. He was a deputy. And they were both killed. Well, that was the charge for which Billy was arrested, tried, and sentenced to hang for. He was never charged in any of the other cases. He was involved in the arrest of two other guys that were themselves pretty odious criminals. One of them's name was Buck Taylor, and the other guy's name was Frank Morton. There were 11 men in the posse. They captured these two, and it took en route from eastern New Mexico back to Lincoln. The two men were murdered, and all of the posse men shot them. Legend has it that each man was shot 22 times, so that each of the posse men shot them twice, so that nobody could claim that the other did it. Well, nobody even tried. First of all, Hinman or Taylor and Morton were two just really outrageous criminals. Morton in particular was described as gorilla-like in appearance and behavior. At 22 years, he was 22 years old and claimed that he had shot 13 men by that age. Wanted to go to 20 before he was 25, but he didn't make it because he got killed before that. But there again, Billy gets credit for having killed both of them. If you see the movies, if you ever saw the movie Chisholm, for instance, you've got Billy the Kid killing both of them single-handedly with nobody else involved in the shooting. But the legend has just grown around all these people. And there are so many people that think that Billy is important. In fact, one historian has flatly said that people like myself who tend to denigrate Billy, he said, you should be promoting him because that generates interest in New Mexico. So with that, I hope you'll take your time to read a book about Billy, pay attention to him because he's not going to go anywhere. We have the Billy the Kid Days in Lincoln every year. They do a reenactment of his final escape from the Lincoln County Courthouse. That's done over and over again. We've got Billy the Kid trail rides, Billy the Kid just about anything you can imagine. So he's going to be around, and if he does promote tourism and promotes our economy, then that's just fine with me. Thank you all for listening to me this afternoon. I hope you're doing well in our current crisis, and I hope I'll see you again soon at the Meadowlark Senior Center.